Hey everyone, we got to carry on fixing up this old Magirus so we can get this thing back on the road. And let's just get right into fixing the rust that is in the front wheel wells, just so I can get that part out of my mind. But first, we got to see if this thing will even fit inside the workshop. Well, the good news is it does fit in here, but only just. It makes the Unimog look tiny. I am once again reminded that I should have a bigger workshop. But anyway, this should be doable, so let's go right ahead and start with the one over here, because this seems to be the part that has the most holes in it. It's a bit of an unusual way they made these fenders, because it's like they made the wheel arch one size, and then they put in this spacer piece right here, which by the way is either plastic or fiberglass, and then the fender itself is bolted onto the bottom of that. But I'm guessing they did that because they probably used this cap for several different types of trucks. So some of them may have had bigger wheels, or some of them may have had lower suspension, so the wheel was a bit closer to the cab. But anyway, these pieces are just bolted together, so it should come right apart. Unless the bolts have just turned into lumps of rust, which they have. I should have known. Every single bolt is just breaking. These feel like they're gonna break as well. Yep. One bolt survived. Half the truck is coming off with this. Nice. Well, it's not looking great, but it's also not looking any worse than what I expected to find up here. I don't know how bad it is over on the driver's side, but on this side we are going to have to work a little bit with the cab floor as well, because that's the floor mat right there. Now I am going to be simplifying this design a bit, like something like this groove it has right here. I'm not going to spend time recreating that, because it really doesn't make any difference when we're just going to be mounting that fiberglass spacer piece right underneath it anyway. So I may as well simplify this and make it nice and easy to work with, so I can save some time on that. Because I'm also going to have to spend a bunch of time trying to get some of all these little broken bolts out. Anyway, let's just start cutting out some of this bad stuff. Alright, so with that we have pretty much all the metalwork done. Well, that is all the metalwork done on this side. For some reason there's just always more than you expect. I don't know why after so long I haven't learned to expect the correct amount of rust, but anyway, we got it all patched up on the inside as well. Even got the inside of this door frame fixed up a bit. So yeah, not too bad for a bit of a rush job. So all that's left to do now is to try and make this look a little bit more pretty. So gonna put some filler on this stuff, at least the stuff that's gonna be visible. Just sand that down to make it look decent. And we're gonna give it some primer and some paint. And probably also a little bit of rust protection in there, just to try and prevent some further corrosion. Alright, so check this out. I was wondering why it looked like this back here. It's like it has hundreds of little stone chips in the paint on this door. I can see some of it is because they've been scraping off this sticker that was on here, but that doesn't really explain the rest of it. It's like it's been hit by a bunch of gravel or something, but normally it would take quite a bit to make stone chips like that in the paint. But it turns out that the paint is just not on here very well. Some of it came off when I took the masking tape off I had here. So I don't think this was prepped very well before it was painted. So this thing might just need a full repaint at some point. But because I am pressed for time, that is not going to be now. For now, I am going to be sticking with the blue color, and I'm just going to be painting and repairing these areas that I've been working on. But I am also going to have to remove these stripes to get to that. But they are just stickers, so shouldn't be too big of a deal. But because I'm removing those, I'm probably also going to be removing that, which means I'm just going to be left with just the fenders and the front bumper being white. And I think that's going to look weird. So I'm going to paint those parts back to that original black color that they were. So it's just going to be plain blue with some black parts on it. I think that's going to look pretty good. Okay, so I immediately changed my mind because these stickers are also just peeling all of the paint off. So if I try to remove these, I'm going to be removing all of the paint that those stickers are attached to. So I'm going to end up having to repaint an enormous part of this truck. And I just simply don't have time for that right now. So yeah, the white stripes are going to stay, at least for a little bit. But I am still going to be painting these other parts black though. So all that bare metal I got on there now, I'm going to be priming that with this EFA paint machine primer. I like working with this stuff because, well, it's just easy to work with, and also it sticks really well to the surface, and it seems to be rust protecting really well, and it's just always worked out pretty nicely for me. Alright, so before we go ahead and put some color on it, I'm just going to spray the inside of the wheel arches here with some of this stone chip protection. It already had something similar to that, although that was more like a rubber kind of coat. But this stuff really helps protect the metal from all the stuff that the wheels are going to be throwing around. And as a bonus, it's also a little bit sound dampening on some of this thin metal. I'm also going to be spraying the new metal on the fender itself with this stuff. not just on the inside, but also on the outside, because both of these and the front bumper already have that textured surface that this stuff leaves behind. So they were already covered with this, and rather than trying to clean all of that off, I'm just gonna finish it off with this again and paint it black afterwards. This is just getting a quick, thin coat just to try and replicate that texture a little bit. So, given the general condition of this whole paint job, I don't really think there's any reason to put too much effort into this final layer of paint. I'm certainly not going to go through the trouble of going to an automotive paint shop and have them mix up the right color and all of that stuff. I am just going to be using some simple rattle can repair paint. I was able to get something that is close enough to the correct color at the local automotive store. So it's just going to get a few layers of this, and that's going to be plenty good for this repair, at least for now. Yeah, so turns out that that was not quite the same color of blue. You know what? It's good enough. Let's just roll with it. Now I am still going to paint these parts black because I do think that's going to look better. But once again, I am just using some simple rattle can spray paint because first off, I'm painting on top of this stone chip stuff, so it's not going to have a great finish anyway. And also the white was done in exactly the same way, so it's going to be nearly impossible to clean this stuff off without ending up having to redo the whole thing. And again, I just don't want to do that right now, so it's just going to get a quick spray over with this. Besides, if the white keeps chipping off, it's just going to be black underneath, so it doesn't make much of a difference. Alright, you know, it's not too bad, really. I mean, the color is a little bit off, but other than that, it's not too bad. Certainly better than it was anyway. Now, final thing before we start putting this back together is I'm just going to do what should have been done from the start, which is to spray some rust protection into this hollow cavity. Alright, here we go. That is one side all done. I don't think I filmed it, but I also straightened up this little step right here. It was sort of pushed back. It must have hit something or so, but I just straightened it up now that I had it off anyway. So now everything is put back together and everything is nice and solid without holes. This is one of the things I hate about rust work, is that now you just can't even tell that I put that much work into it. Anyway, now we gotta go and do all of the exact same stuff over on the other side. So hopefully this side is not going to be nearly as bad. It doesn't look as bad as the other side, at least out here on the surface. But I mean, let's be honest, it's probably going to be just as bad. So I'm just going to go ahead and get right into it. However, I am not going to be filming a whole lot of me doing it over here because the work is going to be pretty much exactly the same. right, here we go. That is all of the metalwork taken care of over on this side. And I started putting some primer on it as well. Now this side was not nearly as badly rusted up under here, but it did have a little bit more down here around the steps, so it ended up being roughly the same amount of work anyway. Now, I was just thinking as I'm waiting for the different layers of paint to dry, before I start reassembling and put this big fender back in place, we should probably have a look at this air valve right up here. This is the valve you use to activate the PTO drive, and it is completely stuck. You're supposed to be able to pull this up, but it's not doing anything. So that means I still haven't even tested out the PTO drive. I don't know if that works, and the PTO is driving the hydraulics, so I don't know if the hydraulics work. And because the hydraulics are driving the big winch that is in the center of this, I don't know if the winch works. So this little air valve is holding up quite a lot of things. But it's really easy to get to it now, so I think we should take it off to see if we can free it up, or at the very least figure out what it is so I can find a replacement. All right. Okay, well that's pretty simple. It's just stuck right up in here. Haha, here we go. Nice. There is hope for this thing now. This is going to work. At this point, I reckon a little bit of cleanup is all it's going to take. And this thing should be working again. It was a little bit fiddly to get this back in here, but here we are. So a little bit of grease on stuff, and let's try this out. So before I just call it good and throw it back on there, I just want to do a little bench test. So I'm just doing a quick and dirty setup here. Okay, so right now we are off. We should not be getting any pressure. Okay, we're reading 0. And let's switch it on. And it's building pressure. Nice. And releasing it. Perfect. That's really nice. So I think lastly, I'm just going to give it a quick cleanup and a coat of something just to try and prevent it from rusting and corroding a whole lot more. All right, here we go. That is all the rust work done and everything put back together. And as usual, having done all of this rust work, it ended up taking a lot more time than I initially expected. But it is really nice to have this out of the way. And I was just thinking, now that we are doing bodywork, let's just go ahead and see if we can straighten up this front piece that has been pushed up right under here. Now, it has been squished pretty badly over on this side, and it is some pretty thin stuff with a lot of shape to it, so I'm not confident I can get it back 100% to where it was, but I'm just gonna do the best I can with what I have available. And if we get this mostly straightened up, we can also get this logo text up in the right place. And unfortunately, the logo itself is missing. That should have been over here. But I was just thinking maybe we could go ahead and 3D print a logo to put that on there, just because I think it would look pretty cool to have it back. It is a bit wobbly when it's up here on the mount, so I think I'm just going to take the whole thing off. That's probably going to make it a lot easier to handle. There we go. Well, it's a good thing we took this off because these brackets are going to need some tightening up anyway. Okay, so really the best way to get something like this out is simply just to pull it back in the direction that it has been bent. Now the problem is that not only has this been squished pretty flat, but also it's sort of rolled over, so I don't really have any good way to get in here and get a hold of it. So I think I'm gonna have to just push on these points where it has been bent, and hopefully we can take most of it out that way. But I'm gonna need a way to hold this down so I have something solid to push against. I think I'm just gonna see if I can quickly build a mount to hold it the way it would have been when it was on there. That should put all the force back in the right place. Well, now I got this mounted to something nice and solid that we can push against. So let's try and put some hydraulics in here and see if we can push this in the right direction. It just fits in here. Perfect. All right. That's spraying down quite a bit. See if we can move this other end. This is not nearly as bad. Ah, yes. All right, here we go. This is really not too bad for, what was that, about an hour of just pushing and shoving and hammering? I think this is about as good as it's gonna get with my caveman methods. This is much better than it was. You know, I really don't mind a few battle scars on my vehicle as long as they were not as severe as it was on this piece. So this is certainly good enough for me. So let's give it a bit of paint and put it back in place. So while that bit of paint is drying up, I figured I would just go ahead and try to straighten up the bumper out here, because it looked to me like this corner over here is just hanging down a little bit, but I figured that must be mostly just an illusion, because I started measuring and it turns out that the whole bumper lines up perfectly with the rest of the cab. Because over here we have just about 5.5 up to that corner, and over here just about 5.5. Same in here in the middle, we have just about 33, and over here just about 33. So it's so little that there's really not anything to change. So I'm just gonna do the adult thing and simply ignore it, and instead I'm just gonna start cleaning this off, see how much of this white stuff I can get off, because this white peeling paint with black underneath, it looks terrible. So I'm gonna get as much of that off as I can, and then we'll just grind it down a bit and paint the whole thing black. Just gonna take off all of these things that are easy to get to. I'm also thinking I will come up with some other mounting for this license plate. Looks kind of odd to have it hanging off the bumper down here. Well, check that out. I can already tell I like this black bumper a lot better than when it was white. So let's go ahead and get this front ready so we can mount it back on here and put all this stuff back together. So I was just trying to figure out how this text and logo is supposed to mount on this front here, because I couldn't quite work it out. So I went and did some quick research, and it turns out that this is not the correct front, or rather this is not the correct logo and text for the front of this truck, because this is a slightly later model. So this is from when Iveco had bought out Magirus. So this front would have had a big Iveco logo right here, and it would say Magirus down here in the corner. But this is the sign that came with the truck, or that was stuck in it. And I'm thinking this was probably done by the German guys that were operating this truck, because Magirus is a German brand, and now suddenly they had to run around in a truck with an Italian Iveco logo on it. So they probably weren't too happy with that, having most likely run Magirus trucks before that. So I'm guessing they tore off the Iveco logo and slapped Magirus on there, because this is a Magirus built truck. Iveco didn't design this thing. This was made in Germany. But yeah, this is the logo that I have, and also I do want this on here because, like I said, it is a Magirus truck. So I want the text and I want the logo on here. Now, when they had that, they would also have a little plaque down here with that 170 just to display the horsepower. I'm probably not going to bother with that, but we're going to put the logo on here. However, the mountings just don't work, so it's just going to have to hold on here with some industrial glue. It'll be fine. Now that was quite an improvement. Well, now that we're out here in some natural light, the color difference of that paint I used is not nearly as bad. I guess it's just the LED lights inside the workshop that made it look a little bit funky. But the reason I brought it outside is because now we can start emptying out and modifying this box on the back. But I think I'm going to separate it here and then do that in the next video. And by the way, if it feels like I'm skipping over some parts of this project, it's because I am. Right now my main focus is getting this thing road legal so we can start using it. So that means I have to make the necessary repairs and some of the modifications I want and then get this through an inspection. Because we are fastly coming into the winter months and there's something we have to go and pick up with this thing. Well, we may have been able to do it with the Humvee, but it would be questionably illegal. And also, I just want to do it in this. But also, I would really like to do it before the winter time. But once we are past all that, we can come back in and fix up some of the other stuff, like the interior and accessories and stuff like that. But that's going to be it for this video, so thank you all for watching along, and I'll see you in the next one.